Do not make us prove what that line means. Admiral Nathaniel Cole said it once, in a voice so calm it made the room behind him go still. Out beyond the last warm lights of human space, the Helios borderline stretched across 8 million miles of black, not as a wall, not as a fortress, but as a quiet chain of white beacons blinking in the dark. Every 6 seconds, they pulsed the same message in plain English, Carvax's battle code, in 27 trade languages. You are approaching protected Terran space. Change course. No one in the galaxy respected that line. Not really. The Council called it symbolic. The Carvax Dominion called it cowardice dressed up as law. Even some of humanity's allies whispered that Earth had grown soft, that humans had spent too many years signing treaties, building schools on border colonies, and pretending the universe could be reasoned with if everyone just sat at the same table long enough. But inside Terran Command, buried deep under the granite weight of Cheyenne Mountain, nobody was laughing. Admiral Cole stood at the center of the operations floor with a paper map spread beneath his hands, the kind most alien officers would have mistaken for decoration. He was 56, white, broad-shouldered in a tired way, with close-cut gray hair and the worn-out eyes of a man who had read too many casualty lists in his life. His coffee sat untouched beside the map, gone cold 20 minutes ago. Commander Rachel Hayes watched the red icons gathering on the far side of the Helios line. 100 ships had become 400. 400 had become 900. Now the tactical screen could barely count them without folding them into clusters. They are still accelerating, she said. Cole did not look up. How far from the line? 32,000 miles. That sounded like a lot to civilians. In space, with military drives burning hot, it was a doorstep. Cole picked up his pencil and made a small mark beside Relay 14. Open channel. Rachel hesitated for half a breath. Not because she doubted the order, but because everybody in that room knew what came after the warning. The phrase was printed in sealed doctrine. It had been argued over by presidents, lawyers, generals, mothers, fathers, and people who hated war enough to plan for it honestly. Humanity's full response was not a slogan. It was a promise with teeth. Rachel nodded to the comms officer. Channel open, sir. Cole leaned toward the microphone. No speech. No anger. No flag behind him. Just a tired man in a dark uniform speaking to an empire that wanted him to blink. This is Admiral Nathaniel Cole of Terran Command. Carvax vessels are ordered to halt before crossing the Helios borderline. Turn back now. Cross the border, and you will face humanity's full response. The message went out across the dark. For a few seconds, only the beacons answered, blinking white against the black. Then the Carvax fleet kept coming. Admiral Cole hated the phrase the moment it left his mouth, because he knew exactly how many doors it opened. On the main screen, the Carvax fleet kept burning toward the border, all sharp angles and blue engine fire, looking less like ships and more like knives laid out on a black table. Around him, the command floor stayed quiet in that particular American way that comes from people doing hard jobs they wish did not exist. Phones rang once and were answered. Keyboards clicked. Someone near the back whispered a prayer under her breath, and then went right back to checking evacuation routes. Cole heard all of it. He always heard too much. That was the part no one saw on public feeds. They saw the uniform, the silver stars, the calm voice, the old man with steady hands. They did not see him at 6 in the morning in his kitchen in Virginia, standing barefoot on cold tile while his wife, Marlene, reminded him to stop using the good mugs for garage coffee. They did not see the grocery list still folded in his breast pocket, or the photo of his granddaughter tucked behind his identification card, or the way his left hand sometimes shook when the weather turned. Sir, Rachel said softly, Council observers are requesting confirmation that our warning was formal and final. Cole gave a small, humorless breath through his nose. They heard it. They want it on record. Of course they do. He looked down at the paper map again. The Helios line had been drawn after the last border scare, back when everyone still believed the Carvax Dominion could be managed with trade penalties and polite language. Cole had sat through those meetings. He had watched senators argue over words while colony parents asked whether their children would be safe. Full response had been the compromise phrase. Strong enough to deter an empire. Vague enough to avoid panic. Ugly enough that nobody wanted to say it unless they had to. Rachel stepped closer, lowering her voice. Admiral, there is still time to issue a second warning. Cole looked at her then. She was 38, sharp, exhausted, and trying very hard not to let anger do the thinking for her. He respected that. Anger was easy. Anger made a person feel clean for about 5 minutes. Then other people had to live with what it broke. What would a second warning tell them? He asked. Rachel did not answer right away. On the screen, the distance markers dropped. 28,000 miles. 26. 24. That we are patient, she said. Cole shook his head. No. It would tell them the first one did not matter. Across the stars, aboard the Dominion flagship, High Marshal Valor Threx watched the same countdown with something close to amusement. His skin, dark blue-black and bright at the edges like heated metal, caught the glow of his command deck as his officers waited for the humans to fold. They are a young species, Valor said, his translator smoothing the contempt into perfect English. Young species love boundaries. They draw lines because they do not yet understand power. One of his admirals clicked his mandibles. And if they respond? Valor turned his golden eyes toward the border, where the white beacons continued their steady blinking. Then we will teach them the difference between a warning and a will. Back under Cheyenne Mountain, Cole watched the fleet come on. He did not feel brave. He felt tired and sad, and very aware that somewhere out near that line, ordinary families were packing bags because men with flags and titles had decided pride was worth risking strangers. He picked up his cold coffee, took one sip, and grimaced. Terrible, he muttered. Rachel glanced at him. Sir. Cole set the cup down. Coffee, not the situation. For the first time in nearly an hour, a few people on the command floor almost smiled. Then the tactical officer called out, Carvax's lead elements are now 10,000 miles from the line. The almost smiles vanished. Cole straightened, slipped the grocery list deeper into his pocket, and rested both hands on the map. He had spent his whole life trying to keep men like Valor from learning through pain what they could have learned through listening. But listening had been offered. The line was still there, and the ships were still coming. The lead Carvax ships crossed the Helios line at 0300 Earth Standard Time, and nothing happened. No missiles rose out of the dark. No Terran battle group came screaming from behind a moon. No voice filled the channel with threats or last chances. The white border beacons simply blinked once, shifted from white to amber, and kept recording. On the command floor beneath Cheyenne Mountain, the moment landed heavier than any explosion could have. A young signals officer swallowed hard and said, Lead elements are inside protected space. Rachel Hayes looked at Admiral Cole. Everyone did. Cole did not move for 3 full seconds. His eyes stayed on the map, not the screen, because the screen made it look clean. Red icons, thin lines, neat numbers. The map reminded him there were people out there. Miners who complained about water pressure. Teachers who bought classroom decorations from supply catalogs. Kids who thought border drills were an excuse to miss math. Log the violation, Cole said. His voice did not rise. Rachel repeated it to the room. Log the violation. Timestamp, telemetry, beacon confirmation, treaty reference. The legal officer at Station 6 answered immediately. Violation logged under Article 9, Section 3 of the Sol Carvax Armistice. Multiple sensor sources. Council observers copied. Cole nodded once. That was all. Somewhere across the stars, High Marshal Valor Threx leaned back in his command throne and let silence stretch around him like a victory parade. The first Carvax formation was now fully across the line. Then the second. Then the third. His officers watched the human channels, waiting for panic, begging, negotiation, anything that sounded like fear. They got nothing but automated border receipts and cold timestamp data. Valor gave a low laugh. There it is, he said. The famous Terran restraint. One of his admirals turned from the sensor table. They have not fired. Of course they have not fired, Valor said. They are merchants with uniforms. They built their reputation on old wars and loud stories. Strip away the myth, and they are still soft-skinned mammals afraid to lose what little comfort they have made for themselves. The Dominion Bridge answered with a ripple of approval. They believed the quiet meant surrender because that was what quiet meant in their culture. Silence belonged to the beaten. Silence belonged to the species waiting for terms. But in Terran command, silence meant work. Rachel moved from station to station, checking evacuation lanes, fuel windows, relay status, civilian manifests. Border colonies 1 through 12 are clear, she said. 15 through 19 are clear. Relay 14 is still reporting a maintenance crew on site, but their shuttle is scheduled to depart within 4 minutes. Cole's jaw tightened just a little. Names. Rachel checked the file. Daniel Lawson, communications engineer. Maggie Lawson, 8 years old. His daughter. For the first time since the warning, Cole looked away from the map. Not much. Just enough for Rachel to see the man behind the rank. Why is a child at a relay station? He asked. School closure after the evacuation order. Her mother is already on the outbound transport. Daniel had permission to bring her while he finished the relay patch. Cole closed his eyes for half a second, then opened them. Tell Relay 14 to leave now. Patch later. Rachel sent the order herself. Her fingers moved fast, but her voice stayed calm when she opened the channel. Relay 14, this is Terran Command. You are ordered to evacuate immediately. Repeat, immediately. Static answered. Then a man's voice came through, strained but steady. Command, this is Lawson. We are packing up. My little girl is putting on her boots. We will be out the door in 2 minutes. Cole leaned toward the speaker. Mr. Lawson, take her in socks if you have to. There was a pause. Then Daniel Lawson gave a nervous laugh that did not hide his fear. Understood, Admiral. On the main screen, the red Carvax formation widened. Deeper now, arrogant now, spreading into human space like they owned the dark. Still, Cole gave no order to fire. Not while one father and one child were still close enough to be caught in the first turn of history. For 17 minutes after the Carvax crossed the line, humanity did not answer with weapons. That silence went out across the galaxy like an invitation for every loud mouth with a broadcast license to call Earth afraid. On Zenith Prime, a council commentator smiled into a camera and said the Terrans had finally discovered the limits of their courage. On the Dominion flagship, Valor Threx watched the human feeds with open satisfaction. They are counting their losses before they admit defeat, he said. Leave them there quiet. It is the sound of a species learning its place. But the silence from Terran space was not fear. It was coordination. In Cheyenne Mountain, the operations floor moved with the steady rhythm of people who had rehearsed a nightmare until they could perform it with shaking hands and calm voices. Evacuation officers checked names against shuttle manifests. Civilian traffic controllers cleared routes through crowded orbital lanes. Coast Guard rescue cutters, old mining tugs, hospital ships, and private haulers all slid into the same emergency grid without speeches or ceremony. Out at Vesper Colony, Mrs. Alvarez, a third-grade teacher from Phoenix, stood in the doorway of her classroom while 14 children filed toward the shelter shuttle wearing backpacks too big for their shoulders. Single line, she said, forcing her voice to stay bright. Just like the drill. Nobody forgets their buddy. A boy named Carter tried to go back for the paper solar system hanging above his desk. She caught his hand and smiled like her heart was not beating against her ribs. We will make a better one, she told him. With glitter this time. At Dawson Yard, a welder shut down a half-built water tower, wiped grease on his jeans, and lifted his old dog into the passenger seat of an evacuation rover because the dog refused to climb. At a hydroponic farm near Beacon 6, a mother packed insulin, baby formula, and 3 jars of peanut butter into a canvas grocery bag because in a crisis, people still remembered what their kids would actually eat. None of them looked heroic. They looked tired. They looked scared. They looked like Americans trying to get their families through one more awful day without falling apart in front of the children. Admiral Cole watched it all in fragments as reports rolled across his screen. Cleared, cleared, cleared. Each word should have made him feel better. Instead, each one reminded him how close the Dominion had come to turning ordinary lives into bargaining chips. Rachel Hayes returned to his side with a tablet held tight against her chest. All civilian zones are reporting clear except Relay 14. Cole did not turn. Status. The Lawsons are still inside. Their shuttle is powered, but the relay door is not cycling. Daniel says the external latch is jammed. Cole stared at the amber dot on the map. Relay 14 was not a military target. It was a communications shack bolted to a rock. 3 rooms, 1 antenna mast, 1 emergency shuttle pad, and now 1 little girl putting on boots while an Empire drifted closer. Rachel opened the channel again. Mr. Lawson, can you override manually? Daniel's breathing came through with a faint hiss of static. Working on it. Maggie is under the console with her backpack. She is asking if the bad guys can see us. Cole leaned closer to the speaker. His voice softened, not enough for the room to call it emotion, but enough for Rachel to hear it. Tell Maggie the porch light is still on. Tell her we see her. A moment passed. Then Daniel answered, quieter. She says okay. On the Dominion Bridge, Valor received word that human colonies were emptying ahead of his advance. His amusement thinned into irritation. They run well, he said. I will grant them that. His navigation officer clicked uneasily. Hi, Marshal. The border beacons are changing pattern. Valor looked toward the display. Across 8 million miles of darkness, the little white lights were no longer blinking in welcome. They were blinking in sequence, one after another, like a countdown only humanity understood. Back in Cheyenne Mountain, Cole folded his hands over the map and waited. One child was still out there. So Earth stayed quiet. Relay 14 was never supposed to matter. It was a squat little station bolted to a dead rock with no name, built from beige panels, old wiring, and the kind of stubborn human engineering that kept working long after a replacement part was discontinued. Daniel Lawson had complained about it for years. The heater rattled. The coffee machine burned everything. The outer door stuck whenever the temperature dropped below -40 degrees. Now that stupid door was the only thing standing between his daughter and an empire. Come on, Daniel muttered, shoulders pressed against the manual release wheel. Come on, you stubborn piece of junk. Under the main console, Maggie hugged her backpack with both arms. Her brown boots were on the wrong feet, because she had put them on herself and Daniel had not had the heart or the time to fix them. Dad, she asked, is Admiral Cole mad at us? Daniel forced out a breath that almost sounded like a laugh. No, honey, Admiral Cole is not mad at us. He sounded serious. That is because admirals get paid to sound serious. The relay lights flickered. A low tone rolled through the floor, not loud, not dramatic, just wrong. Daniel stopped turning the wheel and looked toward the small window beside the airlock. A Carvax boarding craft drifted into view, dark and narrow, its hull blocking the stars. For half a second, his mind refused to understand what he was seeing. This was a relay station. There was no treasure here, no weapons, no command staff, just a father, a child, and a door that would not open. In Cheyenne Mountain, Rachel Hayes saw the same contact appear on her screen. Admiral, she said, and her voice changed enough that Cole looked up immediately. Carvax shuttle approaching Relay 14. The room went colder than the mountain around it. Cole walked to her station. Distance. Docking range. Do we have a rescue unit nearby? Rachel checked the grid, already knowing the answer would hurt. Nearest patrol cutter is 23 minutes out. Nearest military asset is farther than that. Cole stared at the amber dot. That is not good enough. Out in the dark, the Carvax shuttle clamped onto the relay's secondary maintenance collar with a dull metallic thud that Daniel felt through his shoes. Maggie crawled out from under the console. Her face had gone pale. Dad, Daniel crossed the room fast and crouched in front of her. He kept his hands gentle even though they wanted to shake. Listen to me, Maggie. I need you to stay behind me. You do exactly what I say when I say it. No arguing. Her eyes filled, but she nodded. Like the fire drill? Exactly like the fire drill. The inner hatch opened with a hiss. 3 Carvax soldiers stepped into the relay, tall figures in sealed armor, their translators glowing at the throat. Their leader looked around the room as if offended by how ordinary it was. Human technician, the alien said. You will activate this relay for Dominion broadcast. Daniel stood in front of Maggie. He was not a soldier. He had never pretended to be one. He fixed antennas, argued with billing departments, grilled burgers too long on summer weekends, and cried quietly the day his daughter first rode a bike without training wheels. His knees felt weak. His mouth was dry, but he did not move aside. There is a child here, he said. Let her leave, and I will do whatever you want. The alien tilted his helmeted head. The child remains. Compliance improves when attachments are present. In Cheyenne Mountain, the open relay microphone carried every word. Nobody on the command floor spoke. Cole closed his hand around the edge of the console until his knuckles went white. Rachel looked at him, waiting for rage, waiting for an order that would make the room feel less helpless. Cole gave neither. His voice, when it came, was quiet enough that only she heard it. Now they have made it personal. On the Dominion flagship, Valor watched the relay feed appear on his display and smiled without warmth. Broadcast it, he ordered. Let the galaxy see the humans hesitate. But Cole was not hesitating because he was afraid. He was waiting because one little girl was still breathing inside that station, and humanity did not spend centuries learning restraint just to forget it when it mattered most. The Dominion broadcast reached the public channels 12 seconds later, clean, bright, and cruel in the way only propaganda could be cruel. It showed Daniel Lawson standing in the relay room with both hands raised, Maggie half hidden behind his legs, her backpack straps pulled tight across her small shoulders. The Carvax leader filled the frame beside them, tall and armored, speaking through a translator that made every word sound polished. Citizens of the galaxy, he said, observe the Terran response. Their commanders threaten consequence. Yet here, with one child in our care, their courage has become patience. In Cheyenne Mountain, Rachel Hayes turned the volume down before the room could hear Maggie ask her father whether they were on television. Cole saw her mouth move anyway. He did not need the sound. Sir, Rachel said, fighting to keep her voice even. We can jam the broadcast. Cole shook his head. No, let it run. She looked at him like he had slapped the air out of the room. Admiral, they are using that little girl as cover. I know. Then we cannot just stand here. Cole finally turned to her. His face had not changed much, but his eyes had. They looked older now, not harder. Older. Commander, if I answer his theater with a careless order, she pays for it. Her father pays for it. Every family watching from the evacuation ships pays for it in their heads for the rest of their lives. Rachel swallowed. She knew he was right, and she hated that knowing it did not make the waiting easier. So what do we do? Cole looked back at the map. We do what we said we would do. Full response. Not first response. Not loudest response. Full. Around them, the command floor kept moving. The legal team preserved the broadcast with timestamps. Cyber operations mirrored the relay feed through council evidence channels before the Dominion could edit it. Civilian rescue control locked down every evacuation corridor within 200,000 miles. Nobody was frozen. Nobody was helpless. They were just refusing to mistake motion for wisdom. On the Dominion flagship, Valor Threx watched the reaction feeds from neutral worlds and mistook human discipline for humiliation. They will negotiate within the hour, he said. His intelligence officer hesitated. High Marshal, Terran fleet movement remains minimal, but their non-combat traffic has reorganized with unusual speed. Rescue craft, Valor said dismissively. Hospital ships. Tugs. Sentimental machines for a sentimental species. Back at Relay 14, Daniel kept his body between Maggie and the soldiers while pretending his voice was not shaking. Can I get her some water? He asked. The Carvax leader studied him. You request comfort while under occupation? Daniel glanced down at Maggie. She was trying so hard not to cry that her chin trembled. She is 8, he said. That is not comfort. That is basic decency. The alien did not answer for a long moment. Then he gestured toward the sink. Daniel moved slowly, narrating every step because he knew Terran Command was listening. I am walking to the counter. I am picking up the cup. Maggie, stay right where you are, sweetheart. In Cheyenne Mountain, Cole leaned over Rachel's station. Replay the room audio from 30 seconds before docking. Rachel pulled it up. Static. A latch alarm. Daniel breathing. Then something small, barely there, under the relay's old ventilation hum. 3 soft clicks in a maintenance pipe. Rachel frowned. That is not station noise. Cole's expression did not change, but the room around him seemed to tighten. No, he said. That is not station noise. A secure text line appeared on Rachel's screen, routed through an analog emergency band, so old most alien systems ignored it as background junk. It contained 5 words from Lieutenant Mark Sullivan of Terran Rescue Unit 7. Inside the wall. A waiting signal. Rachel looked up slowly. Cole kept his eyes on the relay feed, where Daniel handed his daughter a paper cup of water with shaking hands and a brave, broken smile. Then the Admiral spoke softly, not to Valor, not to the Council, not to the cameras, but to the people already crawling through the bones of that little station. Stand by. Lieutenant Mark Sullivan had been inside the wall for 9 minutes, lying flat in a maintenance crawl space that smelled like dust, warm plastic, and old machine oil. His left shoulder was pressed against a coolant pipe. His helmet light was off. His breathing was slow because fast breathing made noise, and noise got people hurt. Behind him, Corporal Jenna Brooks held a fiber line between two fingers, feeding it inch by inch toward the relay control panel. Between them rolled Patch, a knee-high medical drone with chipped white paint, a faded red cross, and one wheel that squeaked unless someone remembered to oil it. Sullivan had been meaning to fix that wheel for 3 months. Now he silently promised the little machine a full tune-up if they all got out of this station in one piece. In his earpiece, Admiral Cole's voice came through soft and steady. Rescue 7, confirm position. Sullivan keyed his throat mic twice, the old silent code for confirmed. Speaking was too risky. Through a pinhole camera slipped under the panel seam, he could see the relay room in narrow slices. Daniel Lawson stood near the counter, paper cup in hand. Maggie stood exactly where her father had told her to stand, small and stiff, and trying to be brave in the way children do when adults are scared. The 3 Carvac soldiers kept their attention on the broadcast lens and on Daniel, because they believed control was the same thing as awareness. That was their mistake. Humans had been building ugly little stations like Relay 14 for generations, and every one of them had crawl spaces, manual locks, backup switches, and dumb mechanical systems that did not care how advanced an invader thought he was. Jenna tapped Sullivan's boot once. The fiber line was in. On Rachel Hayes' screen back in Cheyenne Mountain, a tiny green dot appeared beside the relay life support controls. She whispered, "We have interior access." Cole did not smile. "Separate the room." Rachel sent the command. Nothing dramatic happened. No alarm. No flashing light. Just a tired old maintenance shutter sliding down from the ceiling between the Carvac's leader and the 2 soldiers behind him, cutting their line of sight for 3 precious seconds. Daniel reacted exactly as he had been told through the small text flashing on the relay monitor behind the aliens. He dropped the paper cup. It hit the floor and bounced. Maggie looked at it. Daniel said, "Now, sweetheart." The floor panel beneath Maggie popped open 6 inches. Sullivan reached up with both hands. "Maggie Lawson," he whispered, "your dad sent us. Come on." She froze for half a heartbeat. Then Patch rolled forward, lifted one tiny mechanical arm, and played a cheerful 2-note sound like a microwave finishing popcorn. Maggie blinked at it. Somehow that helped. She dropped to her knees and crawled into Sullivan's arms. Jenna pulled her backward through the crawl space, wrapping her in a soft gray emergency blanket before the child could ask if her father was coming too. In the relay room, the Carvac's leader spun toward the sound, but Daniel stepped into his view, hands still raised, voice shaking and stubborn. "Hey, look at me." The alien towered over him. "What have you done?" Daniel swallowed hard. "Something smart for once." Sullivan came back for him through the lower access hatch as the old relay systems began shutting doors in sequence, not trapping the humans, but guiding them, cutting the room into safe little pieces the Dominion did not understand. Jenna carried Maggie toward the emergency shuttle tunnel. Patch rolled beside them, finally squeaking, loud as a toy wagon in a quiet garage. In Cheyenne Mountain, Rachel held her breath until the signal changed from amber to green. "Maggie is clear," she said. 2 seconds later, another green light appeared. "Daniel is clear." The command floor did not cheer. Not yet. Cole closed his eyes once, opened them, and placed his pencil on the map. "Good," he said. "Turn the porch light off." Across 8 million miles of border space, every white beacon along the Helios line went dark at the same time. On the Dominion flagship, Valor Threx leaned forward as his navigation display lost its stars. For the first time that day, he stopped smiling. The moment the porch light went out, the Helios line stopped being a border and became a locked room. Valor Threx stared at his navigation display as familiar stars vanished behind a clean black field of Terran interference. His officers moved faster now, voices clicking over one another, their confidence thinning into procedure. "Restore external reference," Valor ordered. "Switch to inertial." "Inertial is drifting," his navigation officer replied. "Gravity readings are inconsistent." "Then use the beacon grid." The officer turned slowly. "Hi, Marshal. The beacon grid is no longer broadcasting for us." In Cheyenne Mountain, Rachel Hayes watched the Carvac's fleet try to correct course and fail by tiny degrees. Not enough to tear ships apart. Not enough to make headlines. Just enough to prove that every path out had already been measured, modeled, and closed. "Gravity nets are active," she said. "Corridor locks holding. Civilian lanes remain clear." Cole stood with both hands resting on the map, shoulders squared, face unreadable. The rescue confirmation sat on the corner of Rachel's screen like a small green miracle. Maggie clear. Daniel clear. For 30 long seconds, nobody asked what came next. They already knew. Cole leaned toward the command microphone. Terran vessels, this is command. Civilian presence is confirmed clear. Execute full response. Disable command, propulsion, and weapons control. Preserve life support. Rescue priority remains in effect. Across the dark, human ships woke up. They did not appear in one glorious charge. They appeared like work trucks at dawn, ugly and practical, and exactly where they needed to be. Heavy cruisers slid out from behind dead moons. Drone carriers unfolded from the shadow of abandoned mining rigs. Coast Guard cutters and hospital ships held back in marked safe lanes, waiting not for victory, but for survivors. The Dominion had expected anger. They had expected revenge, panic, some wild human rush they could point to and call barbaric. What they got was a system. First, their long-range weapons lost authorization. Then their formation links began dropping into safe mode. Then their engines found invisible walls of bent gravity that forced them to slow, turn, and separate without understanding why. On the Dominion flagship, Vaylor slammed one hand onto the arm of his command throne. Return control to manual. Manual inputs are being rejected, an officer said, the words coming out smaller than before. By whom? The officer looked up, pale around the eyes. By our own systems. Terran code is making them follow safety law. Vaylor's golden eyes narrowed. That was when the second Terran broadcast reached every council observer, every neutral station, every evacuation ship, and every Carvax command deck. It did not show flames. It did not show threats. It showed evidence. The first warning. The border crossing. The relay seizure. Daniel Lawson's request to let his child leave. The rescue time stamp. The evacuation manifests. The treaty clause. Then Admiral Cole appeared on screen, not triumphant, not angry, just tired in the way a decent man gets tired when other people force him to become necessary. High Marshal Vaylor Threx, Cole said. Your fleet entered protected space after formal warning. Your forces detained civilians at Relay 14. Those civilians are now safe. Your ability to continue hostile action is being removed. Stand down, and your crews will be treated under Terran rescue law. Vaylor leaned toward his own transmitter. You think this restraint makes you noble? Cole looked at him for a moment, and the whole command floor seemed to hold its breath. No, he said. I think it makes us responsible. Then the Dominion spear went dark, not destroyed, not celebrated, simply disconnected from the war it had tried to start. The Dominion spear did not burn. It drifted in the dark with its weapons asleep, its engines locked, and its crew alive enough to understand the difference between defeat and extinction. That was the part the galaxy struggled with later. Humanity had been given every excuse to be cruel, and instead it became exact. Across the Helios line, Terran rescue ships moved in with steady lights and open channels. Hospital crews guided Carvax escape pods into safe corridors. Engineers cut power to damaged systems before they could fail. Coast Guard cutters painted with old Earth markings pulled alongside enemy vessels as if they were fishing boats caught in a storm off the coast of Maine. On one channel, a young Carvax officer asked in a shaken voice, "Why are you helping us?" The human rescue captain answered without ceremony, "Because the shooting part is over." In Cheyenne Mountain, nobody cheered when Vaylor Threx finally surrendered command authority. Rachel Hayes read the confirmation twice, then looked at Admiral Cole. Dominion flagship has accepted stand-down terms. Council observers have verified the full evidence package. Border space is secure. Cole nodded, but the relief that passed through him did not feel like victory. It felt like sitting down after carrying something heavy for too many miles. Send the terms, he said. Medical access first. Prisoner processing second. Political consequences can wait until everyone breathing stays that way. Rachel studied him for a moment. You really mean that? Cole looked at the screen, where alien life signs blinked beside human rescue markers. Commander, if our rules only apply when we are comfortable, they are not rules. They are decorations. Out near Relay 14, Maggie Lawson sat wrapped in a gray emergency blanket inside a shuttle bay that smelled like rubber flooring, canned soup, and nervous adults. Patch, The little medical drone parked beside her boots and made its squeaky will sound every time it turned. Daniel sat next to her with one arm around her shoulders, trying not to let her see how badly his hands still trembled. When Admiral Cole appeared on the small wall screen, Maggie leaned forward. "Are you the porchlight man?" she asked. Cole blinked once, and for the first time all day, something almost warm crossed his face. "I suppose I am. Did the bad guys get in trouble?" Daniel closed his eyes, embarrassed, but Cole answered gently. "Yes, ma'am, they did." Maggie looked down at Patch, then back at the screen. "Are they still bad guys if your people are helping them?" The shuttle bay went quiet around her in that strange way children can make adults feel suddenly underqualified for life. Cole took his time. "Today, they made a bad choice," he said. "A dangerous one, a cruel one. But what they become tomorrow depends on what they learn from it." Maggie thought about that, then nodded as if he had given her homework. Hours later, when the council replayed the evidence across every major station in civilized space, they did not remember the size of the Terran fleet first. They remembered the warning. They remembered the silence. They remembered a father standing in front of his daughter, rescue workers crawling through a wall, and an admiral who waited until the innocent were safe before he let history move. The Carvax Dominion signed the Helios Accord 3 days later. Their warships withdrew beyond monitored space. Their officers faced open hearings. Their empire learned that a human border was not a dare, and human mercy was not weakness waiting to be exploited. Back in Virginia, months after the crisis, Nathaniel Cole finally changed the coffee filter in his kitchen because Marlene had asked him 4 times, and even admirals eventually lost arguments at home. He stood barefoot on the tile at sunrise, watching pale light touch the backyard fence. For a moment, he thought of the Helios beacons blinking in the dark. A line only mattered if decent people were willing to protect it. A warning only mattered if restraint stood behind it. And power, real power, was not the ability to destroy everything on the other side. It was the discipline to stop the moment stopping became right. That was the lesson the galaxy carried away from Helios. Humanity was not peaceful because it was harmless. Humanity was peaceful because it remembered the cost of becoming anything else.